championship team. The biggest takeaway, though, from Game 3 of the NBA Finals is that as great as Luka Doncic is, he is still deeply, deeply, deeply flawed as a basketball player on the defensive side of the ball. I think he's flawed as a teammate. But there was a key sequence as the Mavericks are trying to come back from a massive deficit in the fourth quarter, and Luka Doncic on back-to-back possessions tries to sell a foul, shooting threes, arguing with the officials, lazy to get back. The Celtics hit two easy buckets, one of them a back-breaking three, and then with 4 minutes left, Luka fouls out. I don't know what he was trying to do. Take a charge, trying to move his feet and body up Jaylen Brown. I don't know what he was doing, but it was piss poor, lazy defending. He fouled out of the game, first time in his career in a playoff game, and it happens in the biggest playoff game of his career. He fouls out, and that spelled the end for the Mavs, and that's going to end up being the end of the season. Zach, I thought that Brian Windhorst, this is as good any piece of analysis, as good any piece of sports media television that you're going to see on the SVP version of SportsCenter last night. This at ESPN. Here is Brian Windhorst with no lies spoken about the effort, the play of Luka Doncic in Game 3 of the NBA Finals.
Yeah, I thought it was perfect that Luka fell onto the ground there in an unacceptable position to put himself in with 4 minutes left with 5 fouls, and then immediately looks at the bench and says, "You better bleeping challenge it," as if it's the bench's fault that he just made a terrible play. I'm standing here in the Mavericks tunnel. Over there is the Celtics tunnel. That's where the winners are. If Luka's ever going to be a winner coming out of this tunnel here, he is going to have to use what's happened in this finals as a learning experience. His defensive performance is unacceptable. He is a hole on the court. The Celtics are attacking him. They are ahead in this series because they have attacked him defensively. And you've got a situation here where Luka is complaining about the officiating. They have begged him. They have talked with him. They have pleaded with him. He is costing his team because of how he treats the officials. He's a brilliant player. He does so many things well. They are here because of how he did. His performance in this game is unacceptable and the reason why the Mavericks are not going to win. He's got to get over this. And the fact that he came out after the game and blamed the officials showed me he's nowhere close yet. So maybe over the summer somebody will get to him because nobody with the Mavericks or anybody else in his life has. And that's where the Mavericks are at this point. They're never going to get to this tunnel with the trophy if he doesn't improve those aspects of his game.
Wow. Really?
That could not be more spot on about Luka and about Luka's game. Luka is a magician on the offensive side of the ball, but when we're talking about him getting distracted by officials, and right. I get it, there's poor officiating across the board. The NBA is flat out deficient in that area. But a big part of his game is to whine and complain and abuse. And that's fine in the regular season. That's fine mid-December if he wants to continue prattling on like that. But, brother, this is the NBA Finals. This is Game 3. And the biggest issue with Luka's game that I got tricked into thinking he had at least worked on enough to be acceptable and put himself in a position to win a trophy going back to last round. But his defense is atrocious. And lazy, flat-footed, not giving two damns about defense, Luka, that we've seen so often in his career, but we don't want to talk about it because we just want to prop him up as one of the NBA's great stars. It can't be ignored any longer. Luka, he sucks at defense, yes. But I think his bigger issue is that he doesn't give a damn about defense. And that's the biggest problem. Luka, being a lazy, listless, worthless defender, came to the forefront in front of America's eyes, in front of the world's eyes in Game 3 of this series. And that's the story of Luka Doncic. That's the story of the Mavs, and that's the story of this NBA Finals, to be quite honest, because it's a foregone conclusion what's going to happen.
Right. I mean, excuse me. Think about when we talk about the greatest players of all time in the NBA, and obviously Mike comes up and LeBron comes up and Kobe comes up, and let's stop there just for a second. Those three guys. Michael was all defensive team, first team NBA every year for like 9 years. LeBron, literally, some of his biggest moments in the NBA are on the defensive end. the big block, any of those things. It's all about LeBron. Kobe, we know, stifler on defense, was one of the best defenders, just up there with Jordan also.
Dwayne, Jimmy,
Dwayne,
right? You name it.
Name the great player in the league. Even how go to the centers, like Hakeem Olajuwon for a couple of years was defensive player. You have to be good on both parts, on both sides of the court, offensively and defensively. Not just in that locker room too, which is another key that we need to get to. And you brought it up earlier. He needs to get better defensively, or he can never be put in that category. I don't care if he wins a couple of rings. He can win 3 more rings. He can't be put in a category of top 5 ever, top 10 ever, something like that, with only being good on one side of the ball. And you're right. This is just a horrible way for someone who doesn't know about Luka's defensive or non-defensive kind of play, seeing it in the finals, not just seeing it in the series, but seeing it up. There's only 2 teams left. Everyone's watching these 2 teams. And if you don't know about Luka's defense or non-defensive way of playing, you saw it and you're seeing it right now. And it sucks. It sucks for Luka to kind of have that be put out like that because he's such a good offensive player. He's a magician. You said it. He's unbelievable at some points on the offensive end. But if you can't play defense in this league, you just can't be one of the top guys in this league. You can be a good scorer. It's the same thing. I was thinking about what example to use, not just the big 3 that we just talked about with Kobe, Mike, and LeBron. It's one of the reasons I think that Kevin Durant and LeBron, when the 2 of them were kind of fighting for the best in the league, why Durant couldn't be the best. He could be 2. He just couldn't be number 1 because of his defense and the way LeBron played defense. Luka could be up there. He just can't be 1. He just can't at this point. And the teammate version of Luka screaming at the bench and like Windhorst said, you better bleeping challenge that call. How about this, Luka? Let me throw this out there, you superstar guy who's trying to win a championship for Dallas. How about now you put yourself in such a shitty position and you can't take charges to try to take that charge with 5 fouls with your team finally back in the game. You have to think. You have to also be on the court thinking and not just trying to score points. It sucks. I love Luka. I love his play. But what he's showing right now is all of his kind of flaws and not the great stuff about him. And it stinks to see that because he's a good player. But Boston taking advantage of everything Luka's giving them at this point, and that's why they're going to win the series. And probably at this point, which sucks for Dallas and the NBA fans, probably going to sweep the series at this point.
Yeah, I'll be honest. As an NBA fan, I'm about ready for the season to be over. I don't even care. Let's just wrap it up. It's sort of like.
But if this was more competitive, Ken, if this was more competitive, it was what we're going into game 4. If it was 2-1 right now, and you had 3 really good games, Kyrie hit a jumper to win, Luka hit a jumper to win, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, one of these guys, and it was one of those series where like, wow, man, they are taking punch for punch. You wouldn't be like this. The Eastern Conference and Western Conference finals pretty much stunk, and the finals now stink. The rest of the playoffs were actually fun to watch. Those series early were kind of fun to watch. It's amazing how they got further in the playoffs, and the playoffs started to stink more. That's crazy.
Let me tell you a Luka story, and this relates to seeing him in person and just observation. So, the Final Four season for FAU, we played the final 2 games of the regular season at Rice in Houston and then at Louisiana Tech, and then the conference tournament, the Conference USA tournament. So this time they're battling to try and lock in the fact that even if things don't go well in their conference tournament, they're going to be an at-large. This is like 30 wins into the season at this point, but there's still a lot to play for, even though they already clinched the regular season conference championship, because they're trying to make sure they have a cushion going into the conference tournament. So they win those games, and Dusty May and the FAU coaching staff, because the conference tournament was in Frisco at the Cowboys training facility, just made the decision to go from Louisiana back to Texas and stay in Dallas an entire 7 days before the conference tournament was to begin in Frisco, just outside of Dallas. So we ended up staying by SMU in the northern part of Dallas. And one of the nights, because again, it's just a whole week of us sitting around, hanging out, and playing cards, chilling, going out to dinner, things like that. And so Dusty was able to put together the team getting tickets to a random Mavs Jazz game at the American Airlines Center there in Dallas. This is March at this point, so it's random. But it's getting to the point they just acquired Kyrie and things were a little bit urgent for the Mavs. And if you recall, they ended up falling short there to get themselves postseason bound. But we're all sitting there. And keep in mind, FAU's been playing high-level basketball now for an entire season. It's late in the year. It's championship time. These guys are locked in. They're really keyed in. These dudes watch basketball every single night, college and NBA. And for all of them, this was their first time ever seeing Luka in person. And for most of them, it was their first time seeing Kyrie in person. And they were all just dazzled by Kyrie and his handles. You don't appreciate, and speaking of a guy who's had a terrible series in the finals, Kyrie as well, but Kyrie, watch him in person, you don't appreciate how proficient he is handling the basketball, how amazing he is, how that ball just sticks to his palms. Then when you see it live and in person, you've got to see it in person, actually believe how his body contorts and how he handles the ball. But then there's Luka, and Luka was doing Luka things, dribble into the perimeter and then kind of leaning in, lowering his shoulder on other people's bodies and throwing up shots, kind of meandering off the ball or constantly, like doing his Luka thing and whatever. But you don't truly grasp how lazy and flat-footed and lackadaisical and uncaring Luka is on the defensive side until you see him in person in NBA defensive possession. There's no movement. There's barely any accounting for who he's guarding or who he needs to switch on. And you can see he perks up as soon as the Mavs get a rebound, get on the ball. But defensively, he is barely moving. He is not engaged. He looks overweight. It's bad. Here's the thing. He doesn't try to hide it. It's noticeable how little he cares about it defensively. And the point of this story is that as we're walking out of the arena, we all met outside of the front of the arena to make sure we could get back on the bus and get back to the hotel. Dusty looks at all the guys and he's like, man, what did you guys think? And to a man, the first thing all these guys say, they go, man, I hate Luka's game. I hate watching Luka play. This is a team that has won 30 games, that is about to embark on, nobody knew it at the time, but the most improbable Final Four run in the history of college basketball. They win, and they were watching this game. And that championship level team where their mindset was at, the first thing that came to mind and all they wanted to talk about, that boy Luka is lazy as hell. In the offseason, there was a podcast done where this college basketball podcast went to Boca. They sat down with Brian Greenlee, a couple of the guys, Greenlee, point guard for FAU, and they asked him, who's the most overrated player in the NBA? He goes, without a hesitation, Luka. And wow. I know it's exactly from what he saw in that random March game against the Jazz down the stretch of the NBA season. But all of that came flooding back last night as I see Luka just in the finals, haphazardly meandering his way through defensive possessions. That's not good enough. That's not championship level basketball. Jaylen Brown, he plays defense. Jason Tatum, he plays defense. Derek White, he plays defense. Joe Mazzulla, he coaches defense. The Boston Celtics are going to win this series because they've had 3 straight games of keeping Luka and company to start the series under 100 points. Defense is going to win this series. Luka, I think Brian Windhorst is 1,000% right. Luka has some mirror self-evaluation that needs to happen because that's not just bad, that's embarrassing to Luka, what he did defensively in Game 3.
He has to learn how to play defense. He does. He's not gonna he's gonna survive in this league scoring points, and that's fine. But he can never be considered one of the top players if you can't play on both sides of the ball. I know I'm kind of reiterating what I said before, but you just can't. And that's why it looks in this series like Jason Tatum has stepped up, just being able to score when he needs to. But when it's not going for him, being the facilitator and always good defensively. And that is the difference between these two teams right now, because I did think Boston was deeper, 3 through 15. I thought Boston was better. But the top two, I really thought if Kyrie could play like he did last night, not the first 2 games, played so much better last night. It was great to see him play like that at least. But if Luka and Kyrie are going off, this team is really going to be hard to beat. I don't care who the 3 through 15 is. And Boston just said, hold on a second, Zach. Let me show you our 3 through 15 and the way we play defense when anyone gets on the court. Like you said, Missoula has coached this team very well. This isn't a high school team where they're learning defense. They're just playing great defense right now, all of them top to bottom. But when your stars are playing good defense, that's normally what shows you what a championship team looks like. Go back to the years that, and I know we always bring it back here to the Heat to a point, but the 2 runs that the Heat made to the finals in the last couple of years with Jimmy, yeah, Jimmy had his games where he scored 40 and had to, but the defense that this team played and plays all the time makes them a factor every single year. Dallas, probably now, the way we look at it, fluky way to get into the finals the way they did, because offensively they were playing like crazy people out there. But now when you play against a team that plays really good defense, who is known as a historically great offense this year in the NBA, look how good this offensive Boston team is, unbelievable. Well, they decided when they got to the finals to still play their offensive game, but let's show them that we can also play defense, and really good defense. Unbelievable.